Yeah, by the way, you can silent countdown. You don't have to. Cool. Where's the go Loughy? I'm kidding. You're good. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NFL Strategy Show, Showdown Edition. And I'm here to tell you that it's been a fun run, fellas. It's been an enjoyable, amazing season. Doing this with Matt Gajewski every single Monday, every single Thursday. This is, in fact, our last Thursday night football game that we will be talking about, Matt. So let's make it a good one.
We have to. We have a great slate of games this week. We have Tennessee taking on San Francisco tonight. A lot of playoff implications. I guess I didn't quite realize how good Tennessee's actually been despite losing A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and Derrick Henry for most of the year. It's a very good team.
They are a very good team, man. They are. Look, last week's loss was weird against Pittsburgh. I don't know if you saw the spot that they had given. It was the worst spot in the history of officiating. I'm telling you, it was that bad. It was egregious. And then they finally fixed it. They got it kind of right, even though it was wrong. Game was over. And that game goes on to be won by the Steelers, which they're another team where you're just shocked that they don't have a losing record this year, Matt.
Yeah, the Steelers, they just find a way to get these gritty wins. And I feel like they've been doing that for years now. Big Ben, I think he's been washed now just for a couple of years. It's been quite some time since we've really seen him play at a productive level, but they somehow always seem to squeak to like 8-8 or slightly above 500. So it's a team that wins a lot with like defense. TJ Watt's been phenomenal, and they have good skill position players around Big Ben. It's just he can't always get the job done.
Yeah, but you're right. The Titans are still tied for second in the AFC, despite losing A.J. Brown, despite losing Derrick Henry, despite Julio Jones being hobbled all of the time. It's really been wild. So I'm looking forward to breaking this one down with you guys. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. If you're watching after the fact, what's up? Comment down below. What do you think? Who breaks the slate tonight? Very simple question. Who breaks the slate? It's always someone. You think it's going to be a Jeff Swain? You think it's going to be a no-namer? Kyle Juszczyk? It happens, man. Kyle Juszczyk was a necessity in a former game with the 49ers this season. Weird things happen. We'll get into all of that. But yeah, hit that thumbs up if you like this content. It helps us greatly. I wouldn't just say that. I don't like talking about this stuff. It's just needs to be done. It's the way things go around here. We got to feed the algorithm and subscribe to the channel. We're less than 900 away from 70,000. You guys have got us this far. Push us over the finishing line. All right. So Matt, oh, by the way, I'm Dave Loughran at Loughy_D. For all you podcast listeners, you want to find me out there on the social medias, LOUGHY_D. I don't even know what my Instagram is. I guess it's the same thing. Probably. Matt is at Matt_Gajewski, GAJEWSKI. Ready to dive into this?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Make it happen. All right. So we've got San Francisco, Tennessee, only a single game tonight. San Francisco 49ers laying 3 points on the road, 23.5 point total. We'll kick it off with them. Then we'll get to the Titans. We'll build a lineup here and give our final takes before we head out. Let's start with Deebo Samuel. I got some insane stats for you here that I would love to hear your opinion on some of this wildness. Now, he led the league in yards after catch. He was second in target share, 31.5%. And he was second in yards through the first 9 weeks of the season, receiving yards, right?
Yes.
Over the since week 10, since week 10, he has a 13% target share, averaging just over 3 targets per game. But he has, he's averaging 6 carries per game. He had 6 total carries per game through the first 9 weeks. He has 33 over the last 5 weeks and at least 1 rushing touchdown in 5 straight games. Here's the kicker. Since week 10, only Jonathan Taylor has more rushing touchdowns than Deebo Samuel, who has 6 rushing touchdowns since week 10.
It's honestly wild. He's been used a lot as a running back. And the interesting thing to me is a lot of these carries aren't necessarily just coming on pure backfield carries. He still gets these like end around carries as well, the reverses, whatever you want to call them. I went back and I looked at his snaps, just where he's playing over the last, couple weeks and stuff. And he's only been lining up in the backfield the last 2 games, at least single digits as far as where he's lining up in the backfield. Most of his snaps are still coming out wide. So a lot of these carries are coming on reverses, stuff like that too, or motions. It's really interesting usage with Deebo. And I don't really think there's a precedent for it.
How much do you like him today at this price point? Because look, you could get, let's break this down. This is my problem. Okay. You have somebody in Deebo Samuel who early in the season was dominant as a pass catcher. Once in a while, he'd get a little rushing opportunity. He did have a rushing touchdown in week 5. I get that. Now you say, all right, the rushing touchdowns have been great. Sure, he has at least one, literally 5 straight games with at least 1 rushing touchdown. All of that is well and good. But Matt, targets are worth a lot more than rushing attempts. Even when you're Deebo and like you said, you're getting those end around and they're designing plays to open things up for you because to be fair, he's been very efficient with these carries. But still, would you rather have 6 rushing attempts per game to 1 or 2 targets? Or would you rather have that standard like we saw early in the season where he was averaging over 10 targets a game through his first 8? Would you rather have that and only like 1 rushing attempt per game? Because I would prefer those 10 targets for a guy that literally led the league in yards after the catch through the first 9 weeks of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's not even close. You'd rather have the targets to the carries in a vacuum, especially on a site like DraftKings where you have the PPR value. But Deebo is so explosive after the catch too, that a lot of his easy catches can turn into bigger plays. So there's a little bit more upside than, I don't know, your standard possession style receiver, which Deebo isn't that. He's very versatile. He's used all over the field. But I'm with you that I would prefer the receiving role. I think there's been some indication, just like reading the tea leaves, that Deebo could be used more as a receiver down the stretch here. I think Jeff Wilson played well enough in now the 2 games we've seen him. Last week in particular, he kind of got off the schneid. And that was a game where Deebo wasn't very involved in the pass game still, but they absolutely throttled Atlanta. The 31-13 score. Deebo had 5 targets in the game, and his routes, they've been spiking back up since he had that like 1 target game where he was basically a running back, a base back. I don't think we see that drastic. I do think Deebo still plays a role in the run game, but I think he is still trending more towards being a receiver rather than a pure running back. Like just single digit snaps in the backfield, I think is pretty telling.
I'm with you, man. And I think that's a great stat that you pulled. I will also mention too, Mike, if you want to pull this up on OddsShopper, I am on the under rushing yards for Deebo today, under 35.5. As a matter of fact, Matt, I've been loving the parlay builder lately. And it got off to a good start yesterday. We used the same projections over at OddsShopper. Everything's free there, entirely free. So you're not being sold anything. I use the same, or they use the same projections there as we do at Awesemo that are, built by Alex and company, some of the sharpest guys out there. So I was like, okay, I had one basketball prop in this 5-leg player prop parlay last night, Matt, that I needed to clear to get to today and then to get to Sunday. And then it's all football, right, for today and Sunday. It's over 6.5 rebounds. It's like, this is a 10 p.m. game. I'm not staying up for this. Fortunately, he had 8 rebounds through the first 1.5 quarters, so we could sleep easy. But how sick is the parlay builder?
It's awesome. It does the work for you. Like,
yeah.
You don't even have to go and pick your own parlay tools. It literally accounts for everything and takes all of the work out of it. And I mean, with this tool, I think you can use it at different points in the day. Normally I try to tell people this is like, you want to bet earlier to get sharper lines. With the parlay builder, it's literally doing the math for you. So I think it's a rare case where you can even use this closer to whenever the games kick off, if you're just trying to build something for a sweat. And I mean, if you are a casual gambler and you're just building for a sweat, I don't see why you wouldn't use this tool. It's free and it's giving you a clear edge and giving you something to root for.
No doubt. And they've been cashing nicely lately. So we're on a bit of a heater over there. But no, the reason I said that is because I was the one that I got in was Deebo Samuel under rushing yards, under, I think it was 35.5 at the time. I know that seems tough because he's been so solid there, but like you just pointed out, Jeff Wilson, if you want to make the argument that Eli Mitchell, until Mitchell returns, Deebo is going to continue to get a ton of rushing work. Well, you have to factor in that Jeff Wilson had 22 carries last game. Yes, they throttled Atlanta. I agree. But it's not like Shanahan is afraid to use Jeff Wilson in a bell cow role. As a matter of fact, you and I had this conversation months ago about, how they could use a guy in Jeff Wilson or whoever it was, but I believe it was Jeff Wilson. And, we've seen he's not afraid to use him. So I like Deebo, but he's expensive, man. And if I'm paying that much, I want to at least feel somewhat confident that he can get back to having similar involvement in the passing game as he did back before week 10 started. That's all.
We didn't talk about this before the show either, but the prop I wanted to highlight myself was over on his receiving yards. And I think if you're doing like parlays and stuff, same game parlays, you can use some of these things in conjunction with each other. But if we do think he's going to be used more as a wide receiver, right now we are projecting him for 68.5 receiving yards, which is where I tend to agree, obviously, based on what we saw him doing last week as far as his role. And you can find over 42.5. I'm seeing that on BetMGM. I know you're in a state with more legal books than me, so perhaps the line might even be a little bit better. But I think you can do both. I mean, these are obviously correlated. If Deebo is under his rushing prop, he's probably being used more as a receiver. And we have a huge win rate, 75% on the over for receiving yards. It's funny. We're talking about props for the same player. We're on different sides, but I think they're actually correlated.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you're a same game parlay type of person, that might be a pretty good spot to correlate, Matt. Under rushing yards, over receiving yards for Deebo.
I agree 100%.
And you, by the way, DraftKings has it at 42.5 as well in PA. So that's a good spot to get to. All right. What are your thoughts on Kittle, who is, I love this guy, always have. I think it's because, when you draft him real late in dynasty leagues, I think I got him in like the 18th round of a startup league in his rookie season. I think 5 years ago. I've always had a soft spot for this guy. And the reason I loved him coming into the league was I looked at him and I said, all right, is he the most prolific pass catcher that's ever been drafted into the NFL? No, but the guy can block like a motherfucker. And he's the type of tight end. You talk about this all the time, Matt. He's the type of tight end, not him specifically, but in general, that can be on the field for 100% of snaps because he's not a liability as a blocker, but he's also a great pass catcher. And that's what I love about players like him. But man, has he not over the years, especially over the last few years, developed as just a flat out elite pass catching tight end who's playing 95+% of snaps every single week, can do everything after the catch that any receiver possibly could. And is just, he's a preeminent player at his position and in this league.
Yeah. You really can't say enough good things about Kittle. I think he probably is the best overall well-rounded tight end in the entire league. And what he does as a receiver is so dynamic too. I think as far as tight ends that are like creating yards after the catch and breaking tackles, it doesn't get any better than Kittle. For a player like Kittle, like Deebo, some of these studs, I don't think the question is really, should you be playing them or not? It's if you're playing multiple lineups, it should be one, how much are you playing? Or if you're just a few lineups, one lineup, where are you playing him? And there's a positive leverage score on Kittle. It's slight. You usually see these guys a little more efficiently in terms of their price, adjusted salary, and their ownership. But Kittle right now, he's slightly over-owned in the captain spot, and he's slightly under-owned in the utility spot. So I really like to use our tools when trying to make decisions with some of these studs on the slate. And right now, if the slate were to lock in 10 minutes or so, I would be preferring Kittle in the utility, perhaps playing a cheaper captain and trying to jam both Deebo and Kittle if possible. But right now, I think that's the best way to use him. And one interesting thing I just want to point out before we move on for Kittle, just comparing him to a player like Deebo Samuel, Kittle has a really high chance of being the top scorer on our slate, according to our simulations, 22.5%. That's higher than Deebo. And I was really surprised by that. So I kind of want to get your take on it before we move on.
I'm sorry. I was reading a comment in chat. My take on which?
Kittle has a higher top overall play percentage than Deebo. Kittle's at 22.5% and Deebo's at 17 based on our simulations. I was a little surprised to see that.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know.
It's not like the most surprising thing in the world, but like, I think it just speaks to how good Kittle's actually been.
For sure. And I think, again, though, it goes back to what you and I were talking about a second before with Deebo, that if his target share is going down, and let's even say that the target share does come back up, we're certainly accounting for what we've seen over the last 5 weeks as well. So even if it comes up, we're not projecting this guy for 10 targets. Meanwhile, George Kittle has a 34% target share in this offense over the last 3 or 4 weeks, has been absolutely peppered with targets. So we know targets are just more valuable than rushing attempts. And I would assume that has something to do with it, Matt. I don't know. We would have to ask Alex there, but is it a little surprising? Yeah, it is, because a little bit, because that's just price agnostic there. That's just, will they be the top overall scorer, right? Not will they be the optimal captain or anything like that. But my God, George Kittle has been an absolute beast lately. Him and Mark Andrews, man, it's been unbelievable to watch these guys. So I do love George Kittle today, and I'm going to try to get a decent amount of him. Do I think he's going to pull in another 15 targets in an overtime game? Probably not. But is 10, 11 targets a legitimate possibility for this guy, who's also insane after the catch? Like you said, breaking tackles. There's nobody better. Yeah, I absolutely love him.
Yeah, it's really hard to get away from Kittle. I think the only case you'd be making is if you're like stacking up the Tennessee side or something and just not playing him for leverage. He's just a good play.
What's the ownership look like on?
He has a positive leverage score. He's according to our tools, he's slightly over-owned in the captain, slightly under-owned in utility.
It's shocking that Deebo's getting more captain ownership than Kittle right now.
I know. I agree. But I think maybe that's a little bit of recency bias. What do you think?
Yeah, it could be. It could be just the fact that the Deebo, the rushing, Matt, I just don't trust. I don't trust somebody to score a rushing touchdown every single game throughout the remainder of the season on 6 rushing attempts.
I know it's that, honestly, for any player, even like a Jonathan Taylor, I don't think you would predict something like that in Jonathan Taylor. He's like, the premier touchdown scorer in football right now. And for Deebo to be doing it at the receiver position, getting single digit snaps in the backfield, that would be very, very surprising.
Anton says a 4-2 Titans build wins your tournaments.
Maybe, man. Maybe.
Yeah, it's possible. He is really bullish on Tennessee tonight, which is strange.
He's always bullish on players.
Yeah, the San Francisco 49ers are a good football team. I'm not saying they're the best, but they're a good football team. They play in a difficult division. That they're still positioned to make the playoffs. You have Kittle, you have Deebo, you have a good line, a good enough defense. I'd be shocked if Tennessee just runs away with this, but we'll see. Anyway, what are you doing with the run? Actually, no. What are you doing with this is a weird one, but I think it probably deserves a little bit of conversation given that he's been getting some work. Jauan Jennings has probably benefited from the lack of opportunities in the passing game from Deebo Samuel. He's got 11 targets over the last 2 weeks. Do you have any interest in somebody like him today?
I think there's interest in tournaments. I don't think it's like the highest probability.
He's too expensive.
Right. But we always need to talk about these guys, right? Because we need to talk about the players that are on the field that could potentially score these touchdowns or whatever it may be, have a big game. I think like his snap shares at around 45%, which is pretty low overall. I mean, for a player that expensive, you'd be wanting them to play a much more consistent role on offense. So I'm trying to go back and forth between these tabs, but I'm imagining right now he probably has a negative leverage score. I don't know. Is that kind of how you view him too?
Yeah, absolutely. How do you not?
He actually has a slightly positive leverage score.
Wow. What's the ceiling game look like on Jauan Jennings though?
But I mean, we're talking about like not even 1% for positive leverage.
Right. It's negligible.
Right. And it's all in the utility spot. I don't know. So like it comes down to price with him, right? Like he's nearly the same price as a guy like Jeff Wilson, who's I think the most underpriced player on the entire slate, given their role. In a 1-for-1, just in a vacuum situation, I'm never going to click a guy like Jennings when you can get these cheaper players. Like I just don't think the gap in price is that far away from each other.
I don't think so either. And I think the rest of the passing game for San Francisco begins to look really ugly. Okay, so the only other guy is Brandon Ayuk. And with Brandon Ayuk, even last week, 2 targets. Okay, but he played what? Almost 100% of the snaps in that game, Matt. I don't think you've seen that the full capabilities of Ayuk this year, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Deebo Samuel and George Kittle are just such dominant forces in this offense. But in that same breath, I do think you're probably what's the leverage score actually before I say this? Okay, so he actually has a negative leverage score
for Ayuk.
Yeah, I thought it would be positive. I thought his ownership would be really low at that price, but he would, because he's on the field so much and because he actually has a respectable target share in this offense, I thought he would actually be getting a little bit of a higher leverage score.
I think this could change throughout the day. It's looking like our ownership for Jeff Wilson might not be correct. So we'll see how this changes. But Ayuk, the issues are if Deebo's used like a real receiver, Ayuk is going to take a step back because you have a healthy Kittle, which we didn't have for a lot of the year. And a lot of Ayuk just rides on Deebo because we know Deebo is going to be the focal point of the offense, regardless of how he's used. If he's used as a receiver, he's going to get his targets. If he's lining up out of the backfield, he's going to get carries. So Ayuk really sees a ceiling when Deebo's playing that running back role, which you and I both agree we don't see coming today. But as far as players on the field that have a chance to catch a big touchdown, deep plays, that's his skill set. He's a player that has that boom ability. His optimal captain percentage, it's not great. It's 2% here, but he has a 4% chance of being the highest score in the slate. And I think a lot of that would come down to his big play ability. Like we have Eli Mitchell projected in right now. That's why this is really hard to see. And he's not playing. So we'll see if we can get an ownership update and get correct numbers here, but I'm not sure.
So yeah, that's going to change things for sure. Let me see. What do we have? Where do we even have Mitchell?
What's that?
I don't know. I was just looking for, do we have, hold on. So, okay, now in our ownership projections, we have Mitchell out.
All right. It must have just updated.
No, the top stack tool, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Is not updated. So yeah, if you go to the ownership, we do have him listed as out. Okay. Which means we have guys like Jeff Wilson at 51% projected ownership. Very, very strange to me that with all DraftKings does to make sure backup quarterbacks, Matt, aren't, you know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
Aren't minimum salary if a quarterback were to go down. Do you not think there might have been some preemptive pricing to say it's maybe on a Thursday night game, we shouldn't price Jeff Wilson at $5,200?
I'm surprised they did that. It's not like Jeff Wilson's been handling a lead back role too. It's not like this injury to Eli Mitchell was unexpected. Like he's been dealing with this for weeks now. So sometimes DraftKings misses things. I was a little surprised by this one, but right now I think if you're playing low risk contest cash formats, he's got to be the first player in your lineup, whether it's captain or utility because of his price. He's just so cheap. Yeah,
I know. I don't really see any way around it. Do you? I mean, yeah, obviously in tournaments, I do think in large field, I don't see, let me rephrase this. I don't see any way around flat out looking at Jeff Wilson as a good play. Right. I do think in large field tournaments, you should, not could, but should have lineups without him, because if he goes for one of these 16 carry games, Matt, and he has 65 yards and no targets in the passing game and no receiving touchdowns, which is very much in play. I mean, that's very possible that happens. You're going to be very not happy not to have one of the highest owned players on the entire slate.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, what's his pass catching role? They use JaMychal Hasty in that capacity, and they even use Juszczyk in that capacity.
Right.
I know San Francisco is laying 3 here, but if this gets a little wonky and it doesn't play to the spread and maybe Tennessee scores the opening touchdown, do we see limited snaps for Jeff Wilson? So he's not the locked in lead back like Jonathan Taylor or somebody who's going to play in all game scripts. That's a legitimate concern for him. So I do think there is merit to fading him in large field tournaments. I think he's going to come in under owned based on what we have right now. So where you play him, I think will be key. But overall, it's not like this a guy that can't fail. He definitely can't.
That's all I'm saying. Tennessee's run defense isn't that bad. And lest we forget that Deebo Samuel might get the carry at the 9-yard line and punch it in the end zone. Who knows? There's ways that it can go wrong. Anyway, what else do you want to talk about for San Francisco before we move on?
Yeah, one other thing is that they just use so many players. And 2 weeks ago, we saw a bust Jeff Wilson game, but it could be Deebo, it could be Kittle, and we talked about Ayuk too. Those are all players that are live to not only, have a big game, but ultimately be potentially the winning captain slot. One thing about San Francisco, I think that's nice, is they're fairly condensed. We don't have as many potential options that are like the Stone Min here. They don't rotate a lot of players onto the field. They don't use as many 2 tight end sets anymore. And when they do, like Charlie Werner's their second tight end, he's purely a blocker. So you're not going to see a lot of him. I mean, there's like Trent Sherfield coming on the field for a handful of snaps if you want to just throw a complete dart. But I think if you're going to those type of players, you're probably better suited to the Tennessee side. The only player I'll mention in this capacity is going to be JaMychal Hasty. If they get in negative game script, does he potentially play more and catch balls out of the backfield? I think there's the potential for that. But at the same time, JaMychal Hasty, it's not like he's the Stone Man. He's $1,000. So he's a little less expensive than Juszczyk. I think that's nice, but he's going to be very, very risky and very game script dependent.
I think he's fine too. But like you said, last week, Wilson played 88% of snaps. Hasty played 5. Juszczyk played 53, but we know what he's out there mostly for. I think Juszczyk and Hasty are both viable in large field tournaments, 100%. If this game does go sideways, or it's just kind of back and forth, yeah, you're right. Could Hasty get 5 targets, Matt? It's not out of the question. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. And if that happens and you have a $1,000 Hasty over a $5,200 Jeff Wilson, who is now kind of scripted out of getting that 20+ carry game, you're going to be in really good shape because it probably gets you from Ayuk to George Kittle, or just an example, but it's going to get you from one of those kind of middling options to another top tier player, maybe a quarterback, maybe you can play Mitchell and Deebo together, and that could be the difference maker. Yeah,
for sure. And one positive thing about Jeff Wilson and JaMychal Hasty is they play in very specific game scripts. So I think you can build your roster with that in mind and try to maybe tag in a little extra correlation if you're using, a lot of people are going to use Wilson, but if you're using Hasty, San Francisco is potentially throwing, maybe you're using like the runners on the Tennessee side.
Any other thoughts on defense kicker here before we talk about the Titans?
I think the kickers are pretty viable here. It's not a spot, again, where I'm trying to go overboard on the kickers. The defenses are tough for me because these teams both really like to run the ball if they can. So I think you really got to play the game script angle with that too. If you think San Francisco is up in the game, playing Tennessee's defense probably isn't the sharpest thing because of how the San Francisco offense will operate in positive game script. They're just going to continue running. But conversely, the team that's up in the game, they're by necessity probably going to face elevated pass attempts. And both these quarterbacks have been turnover prone in the past. We know Garoppolo is not really mobile, so potentially more sacks with him. But I'm not really trying to take a stand on the defenses or the kickers in large field tournaments, just playing them when it makes sense and when I get to them naturally.
Orton's neckbeard. Between pink and crimson, how red is that inch of Dave's forehead at the end of the day when he takes off the hat? I don't think this hat's not even that tight. Is it red? Maybe a little imprint, but I don't think it's red. I don't think it's like crimson or pink. Maybe. I don't know.
Chat is unbelievable. What? Some of the things I read in chat are unbelievable.
I know. Well, the things they think of are even funnier. This head's not even tight. I mean, look, see, it's not tight. It's good.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, Matt, have you heard of Jock Market?
Yes, sir. But tell me more.
I would love to tell you more about Jock Market. They've turned daily fantasy sports into the stock market. What does that mean? Oh, I'm glad you asked. You can make money down to the hour or the minute or the second over at Jock Market by buying, selling, or holding shares of individual players with real time or in real time for real money. You got markets for football, for hockey when it comes back, baseball, basketball, PGA, all of that good stuff. When you download the app, JOCKMKT in the App Store or the Google Play Store and use the promo code Awesemo, you get up to $50 on a deposit bonus for your first time signing up and depositing. So yeah, obviously the simple thing about it is you put your research in, you watch these shows, however you want to do it, right? You do your own independent research, your DD as one might say. And then what happens is you can go in, you can buy players, you can hold them throughout the day, you can buy more, you can sell them, all of that good stuff based on where your feel is. But they have an IPO period, right? Where you can pick up shares of your favorite players. And fortunately, because we always look out for you guys when we partner with these sites and these apps, we have free Jock Market IPO projections to help you beat the market. They're never behind a paywall. They're free every day of the week at awesemo.com. So check them out when you do. All of that's well and good, but here's the kicker. If you sign up using the promo code Awesemo, first of all, like I said, $50 deposit bonus first time users. The first market guarantee, however, is that Jock Market will refund any losses in your first NFL or NBA market up to $100. So if you play for the first time, you get your ass kicked, up to $100, you are refunded on all of those losses. So check it out. Use the promo code. Take advantage of the first market guarantee and the free IPO tools at Awesemo. Jock Market, JOCK space MKT, sponsor of the Showdown Strategy Show. All right, Matt, let's talk about the Tennessee Titans. I want to start with one thing I forgot, Jimmy Garoppolo. Same opinion usually on all this stuff though, but how do you plan on utilizing him today?
Garoppolo, I think, is a pretty decent play at the quarterback position. And I think you can use him in negative game scripts too if you're building in that sort of correlation here. But he is a very positive leverage score right now. As soon as this tool gets updated, I don't expect Garoppolo to really change. But he has a 13% chance of being the highest scorer on the board. That's pretty high. He's under-owned in both the captain and the utility spot. And I think that makes sense. We have very popular Kittle. We have very popular Deebo. I think you're going to see very owned Jeff Wilson. So if you're trying to get a little different, it appears Garoppolo, even though he's coming in with some ownership, and we always see this with quarterbacks, it's not quite enough. And I like that San Francisco has multiple pass catchers that are viable, but they're still condensed. So a guy like Ayuk, if you want to stack him in a contrarian way, those are available to you.
Favorite contrarian option from San Francisco?
I think they're all pretty owned. So it's got to be probably Ayuk, like out of the players that are most involved.
That's what I was saying earlier. I was a little bit surprised that the leverage score was where it was. I kind of get it, but yeah, I don't know. I would agree with you. Or Hasty, just going Hasty over Mitchell or over Wilson in large field contest.
Yeah, large field contest, I think that's certainly viable too.
Because he's getting no ownership at all. Hey, the Tennessee Titans are at home, 3-point dogs. But guess what, Matt? Looks like they're getting some of the cavalry back.
It's about time too. I can't believe they're as good as they are with the players they've been trotting out there.
It's crazy. I mean, to be fair, their offense has been somewhat anemic. You know, they put up 20 on the Jags, but they held them to 0. I don't know. They're 1-3 over the last 4.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like a lot of their wins came when they had, Derrick Henry, their studs. And I expected them to struggle, but they've been able to keep it together enough to now they're going to be with, it seems like AJ and Julio are going to play. I'm shocked Julio is going to play in this game, but he logged a full practice. Unbelievably.
I know.
I can't believe it. Like the guy he aggravated his injury that he'd been on injured reserve for. and then he vlogs a full practice. Like he hasn't practiced in full in 6 years.
I know.
Like what made yesterday the day?
Right. Dude, when I was writing up the run sheet and researching this morning, I was about to just, you know how I put like the injuries on the run sheet? I put AJ Brown expected to be activated from IR, and then I was about to put Julio Jones out. And then I realized he wasn't even on the injury report. He didn't even have an injury designation.
He left the game early and didn't return. I just don't know what happened.
I know he's back. And by the way, I said that was going to happen. I say he's leaving. There's no doubt. First half, Julio Jones is out. He's leaving this game too. Let's be fair. I mean, Julio's aggravating that in the first quarter, Matt.
Yeah, he's done it repeatedly this year.
It's a shame.
For years.
I love Julio, man. I love Julio Jones so much. It's tough. He'll be back next year. He won't. I mean, I hope, but it's looking like those hammies are just string cheese at this point, and I don't know how much longer you keep going with that. If you go and look at some of the seasons he's had, though, he's had some of the most insane seasons that
man,
that
he's
any
been
receiver
awesome.
will ever have.
He's been awesome. He was a great receiver in his prime.
All right, so let's talk about the passing game first. Then we'll dive into this mess of a run game. What are you doing with AJ Brown, assuming he plays, and Julio Jones?
I was surprised how expensive AJ Brown is coming off the injury. And it's not that he's like, this is where he should be priced if he probably is still even a little cheap, but I was surprised to see the price on AJ Brown here. Ultimately, I think he's just going to project a little bit worse than the elite San Francisco options. And a lot of that is because San Francisco is the favorite in this game. We're not 100% sure what AJ Brown's role is going to be. Like, is this guy going to come back and play right away? The reports early in the week where like the language just confused me a little bit. It was barring any setbacks, he's expected to play. So that to me suggests like, this guy might not be 100% yet. Like they might be rushing him back because they are a playoff team right now that needs wins to secure their spot. So that's a little bit worrisome to me. I'm not sure where AJ Brown's at in his recovery.
I don't either, but you know what I'm wondering? And concerns me, Matt, is are these guys potentially getting rushed back into action because their offense has been so bad lately? Listen to what they've scored. This is, if you don't want to use this, that's fine, but I think it's relevant when you consider the teams they've faced. They've scored 13 against the Pittsburgh defense that's been gashed everywhere. They scored 20 against the Jags. And if you watch that game, the offense actually was not that great. 13 against New England, 13 against Houston. That's the last 4 weeks. They really struggled against bad teams. And I know that Houston game, bad weather and such, and Tannehill got picked 4 times, but how much do you think it's possible that Antonio Brown or AJ Brown saying, look, I'm good to go. Maybe he's not fully back. But you know what? I don't even know why I say that. He went on the IR in week 11, right? He went on the IR in week 11. So it's week 16, right?
Yeah.
A short week, but week 16, it's not crazy.
No, the only thing that concerned me was the language in the report saying barring a setback. So you're like, you're worried enough about a setback that you had to say that.
Are they, or is that just shit reporting?
Could be shit reporting. I don't know. That was Rappaport. So we gotta be a little worried about the source. Right.
So if he doesn't get hit by a bus, he'll be on the field today.
You never know with Rappaport. I don't know, man. But to your point, like I think predictably Tennessee's offense has struggled. Like I mean, Nick Westbrook-Akine played on 89% of the snaps last week. Jeff Swaim, 74%. Cody Hollister, 70%. Like these are practice squad receivers. Like would Nick Westbrook-Akine make the Cardinals roster? I don't think he would.
No.
Like there's plenty of rosters in the NFL where I think like, would he make the Cowboys roster? Would he make the Chiefs roster?
Dude, I don't know if he'd make the Eagles roster over Arcega-Whiteside.
Like, and he's the number 1 receiver with Julio and AJ Brown out. Like, I'm not surprised they struggled. Like Dontrell Hilliard, would he make the Packers roster?
No.
Would he make the Raiders roster?
Wasn't he on the practice squad up until a few weeks ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
So
their
now-
skill position players are horrific.
They're really,
Horrific.
really, really bad. But that's the thing. When you have Derrick Henry, it so easily masks everything else. Even last year, you didn't have Julio, you had Corey Davis. I get that, but it was Derrick Henry and it was AJ Brown, and Davis was a fine number 3 option. But actually, no, I guess you had Jonnu Smith. Yeah, I retract that statement, Matt. It's horrible though. It's horrible.
It's entirely the Titans' fault. Like they messed this up themselves. You look at what they do late in the draft. Like they drafted 2 absolutely atrocious prospects in Racey McMath, and I forget the other dude. He went to Louisville. Watkins or something. Is Fitzpatrick. Des Fitzpatrick.
You're talking about Dre Fitzpatrick? Yeah.
Yeah. These 2 players were horrific prospects. Fitzpatrick, he wasn't even the number 1 receiver at Louisville. And Racey McMath had like 20 career catches at LSU. He was a special teamer there. Like in the late round of drafts, you can get legitimately good prospects. Like that's where Darnell Mooney was drafted. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a day 3 pick, and you're wasting these picks on these just buffoons. So you go from one of the best receiving corps in the NFL with AJ Brown and Julio Jones. 2 of them get hurt, and suddenly you're like barely a better than the Jacksonville Jaguars. Like, give me a break here, Titans. Like you got to make some better decisions.
So you don't think Racey McMath has a shot at being a great player in this league?
Dude, Racey McMath was the number 5 receiver for LSU last year, a college team. I understand he ran a good 40-yard dash. I understand that. But this guy could not play receiver at the college level. What makes you think he can play at the NFL level?
I don't know. I'm a big Racey McMath fan.
I'm going to look up how many career catches he had. This dude was atrocious in college, like a horrific player.
Oh, it's so good. Hey, good question in chat. He says, do you actually peel your string cheese or bite it like some sort of animal? Matt?
I peel it.
You have to peel it. If you don't peel, you're right. You're a savage. You're a Neanderthal, a caveman. Doesn't work. Biting string cheese. Now, I will grab a slice of like American out of the fridge, sliced American, and just eat that. But string cheese has to be peeled.
I agree.
And you have to get, let me be clear as on another thing. This is a lot more important. If you're going to do string cheese, you have to go with the polio. If you go with anything else, you go with store-bought string cheese, you are making a catastrophic mistake, because that shit doesn't even peel. Like you'll try to peel it and it just breaks off in chunks. String cheese connoisseur over here. I could talk about it all day. All right, Matt. With Brown though, I know you're looking up Racing.
I found it. I got his stats. They're very bad.
All right. What are his college stats?
He had 500 career receiving yards. He never had more than 17 receptions in a single season. He never had more than 285 yards in a single season.
All right. So,
my God, I'm getting sick to my stomach looking at these Racey McMath stats, knowing the Titans spent a day 3 pick on this guy.
What was he, a 5th rounder?
Yeah, he was a 5th rounder. All right. So Racey McMath finished as the 5th leading receiver on LSU in his final season of college.
That's really bad.
Really bad, with 195 yards.
Who was the 4th?
Eric Gilbert, who you probably don't know Eric Gilbert. He's a premier 5-star tight end, but he's kind of out of college football right now. He's got some mental health issues.
That's a shame.
He's got the Calvin Ridley thing.
Who was the 3rd?
Jeray Jenkins, who's also atrocious.
All right. So if we're looking at the rest of the passing options, I'll be completely honest with you, man. I know it's a showdown slate, and I know we have to make some concessions, as you would say. You also have to dive a little bit deeper than we normally would. But it is an absolute wasteland when it comes to pass catchers for the Tennessee Titans outside of AJ Brown. I mean, even Julio Jones, it's a little bit disturbing to think that you might have to play him at his price point. I could make an argument for it, and I'll probably have a little bit of Julio Jones. He's sub 20% owned. I'm fine with that. But do you really want to get to any of these other guys? I mean, even the Ferksers and the Swains, you have to consider that because they're tight ends, and and they have some touchdown equity, whereas other guys don't. But it's ugly.
It is really ugly. I definitely want to get to some Julio Jones and AJ Brown as the contrarian options for a passing attack that should be improved. And I think a lot of people probably will discount it because of how bad they've been recently, which I don't think is necessarily justified. The main question I have is how are they going to configure their roster? So we know that AJ Brown and Julio Jones are both primarily perimeter receivers. So is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, who's been largely the player that's replaced AJ Brown and Julio Jones. But does he move into the slot? Do they move Julio? Do they move AJ Brown? Do they continue to play Cody Hollister over Nick Westbrook-Ikhine? So there is room for uncertainty with this wide receiver 3 position. And I think it could be a spot where you gain some leverage in tournaments just because we don't know for a fact who's going to man that position. I personally tend to think like maybe it's still Cody Hollister. Like Nick Westbrook-Ikhine has been a perimeter receiver entirely. And they don't really have like a clear slot option. Perhaps it's just like Ferkser or something. We don't know.
God, I don't even know if it matters. Well, maybe it matters on this slate. If we're going to build a lineup, let's see what we're left with if we do try and go with, several expensive options on this one. And like even in the mid-range, I do think this slate is somewhat interesting because there are some relatively respectable mid-range options. I want to talk about D'Onta Foreman here because, I've been relatively high on him over the past few weeks just based on expected workload. Has he been great? No, he also hasn't been bad either. He's got 14, 14, and 18 DraftKings points over the last 3 weeks. It's really not that bad. He has how many carries? 41, 54 carries over that stretch as well. So that's all fine. No, he has more than that actually, but that's fine. Coming off a 22 carry game, he has 200-yard rushing performances since week 12. So in his last 3. But if you look at the last 2 games, Matt, because that's since McNichols has been back and it makes things a little bit easier for us to understand. Foreman has a 55% share of carries in the backfield. Dontrell Hilliard's at 23 and McNichols is at 22. But at the same time, McNichols and Hilliard got a lot of garbage time work against Jacksonville. They just took Foreman out. We saw last week in a close game, which they lost, that Foreman had 22 carries and 60% of them. So how do you break this down? And we can factor in the target share as well. Over the last 2 weeks, Hilliard 13%, Foreman 8% target share, and McNichols 6.5%.
Yeah, and Foreman got banged up in that game. So I'm not sure that he got all the carries he maybe would have seen. They're giving him the full Derrick Henry role. And he's not Derrick Henry, but he's productive enough where he's somebody you should be considering on this slate. He practiced in full, so I'm not worried about the injury anymore. It appears he's fully over this. And he's been the guy they've given the bulk of the workload when the games are competitive. And he's actually gotten some targets out of the backfield too, which surprised me a little bit. That's not something he did at Texas, but he's a big back. He's built a little bit like Derrick Henry. You're just not going to find anybody as athletic as Derrick Henry. So Foreman, I think, is interesting at his price. He definitely has a ceiling if Tennessee gets up in this game. They've shown a willingness to ride him to 20 carry games. Again, efficiency's been middling in some of these contests, but at the same time, you just don't get a lot of guys that have this projected workload. So Foreman, I think, is very interesting for that reason. I'm happy he practiced in full.
Me too. I have no problems getting there. Do I love the matchup? No, I'm not thrilled about it, but I think his price is reasonable. I don't have an issue with that salary. I don't want to captain him really though, Matt. That's kind of the thing for Foreman. And correct me if you think that this is a spot where we should be captaining him, but I still am not huge on captaining a D'Onta Foreman because he lacks the pass catching upside for the most part. Even though he's not a bad pass catcher, I think there are some better ways to go there. Do you want to have some Foreman in the captain spot?
Yeah, I want to have some, but not too much, honestly. His role isn't drastically different than like a Jeff Wilson on the other side. Both are primarily early down backs. I think they'll use Foreman a little more than Jeff Wilson. But ultimately, Foreman's not the guy they prefer to use on pass catching work. And then they're the team that's the projected underdog. And Foreman's more expensive than Jeff Wilson. So you just get a lot of additional like little bonus pieces with Jeff Wilson that you don't get with Foreman. So right now I would prefer to lean that direction in low risk contests, but in tournaments, I think you could still take a look at Foreman overall. He is a negative leverage score for us. And I think a lot of that is just because they're the dog in this game. He's coming in with pretty decent ownership. But again, if they get down in this game, he might just not see the same workload he's seen in recent weeks.
Right. 2.8% optimal captain probability. So, it's all right. But do you think that guys like Hilliard or McNichols could be decent flex options or utility options today?
I think Hilliard mainly due to price. We're going to need to punt somewhere. And we talked about the options on San Francisco. They're basically non-existent. You have JaMychal Hasty. And once you go from JaMychal Hasty, you're basically looking at Juwan Jennings, who's $5K in the utility, which is a lot of money to pay for your punt option. For Tennessee, we at least have some options down here like Hilliard. We can say whatever we want about his workload. He has gotten some work. I think you can rationalize like the game script in one game, the Deontay Foreman injury in another game to explain why he's been used so much as a change of pace. But at the same time, he still will be getting change of pace work for a guy that's 2,800. And outside of that, like McNichols, maybe they used him more in the past game. He's 2,200. Ferkser, I think they could see him more out of the slot. They use multiple tight ends a lot in Tennessee, which has kind of been a staple of their offense, which is why I think the wide receiver 3 role isn't quite as clear either. But these are good GPP options. I think they're all really risky, though, for cash games. And it makes me nervous because I think in cash games, low risk contests, you're going to have to play one of them.
I do too. And I think they want to run the ball, though. We've seen that. They lost last week. And granted, it was a competitive, low scoring game, but they want to run the ball. If you look at all of the carries, Foreman had 22, but Dontrell Hilliard still got 9 carries in that same game. So that's 31 right there. And then you had McNichols come into that one with 6 attempts himself. So that's a lot of rushing attempts, Matt, especially in a game that you didn't have firm control of.
Yeah, for sure. And I ran some optimal lineups this morning just using our projections, and Hilliard was the preferred option among this range. I don't really see that changing throughout the day. Like we're not going to see Ferkser spike for a larger role. I think he's just going to be in that rotational role himself. In tournaments, whoever scores a touchdown out of that group could put you over the edge. But for low risk contests, I think Hilliard has the safest workload of the group.
Agreed. And you know what? You might get a carry inside the 5 or 10 from him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan Tannehill, that one thing is Ryan Tannehill is actually pretty frequently used in goal to go situations, which sucks, but that's probably just something you're going to have to deal with. Anything else you want to hit on, be it Tannehill or the rest of this Tennessee team, defense, kickers, skill players? Hit it, Matt.
So I think you're going to see a rotation at the wide receiver 3 again. So I just kind of want to highlight this. We briefly glossed over it. Westbrook-Ikhine has been primarily a perimeter receiver, so I don't think he plays more than like a quarter of the snaps. The same goes for like a Chester Rogers, who's more of your traditional slot receiver. Even Cody Hollister has been like a boundary receiver for them. So I think it's kind of split down the middle for them. And I also think these guys will get squeezed because you have Jeff Swayman as your primary tight end, but then they use Michael Pruitt and Ferkser's primarily a receiver when he's out there. That's a good spot to target for tournaments because you have so many guys mixing onto the field. And if one of them finds the end zone at low ownership, that could be a big difference maker for you at a cheap price. But ultimately, it's going to be a pretty nasty rotation for this wide receiver 3 and these ancillary tight ends.
So before we build a lineup, ask one more time if you could hit that thumbs up. That'd be great. Hammer that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. If you forgot, I get it. Things happen. But now you have a chance to totally redeem yourself. And if you're on a phone, click out of that chat, hit thumbs up, and click back into it. All good. Helps us greatly, and we appreciate you for it. And one more thing, free content on the site today. If you haven't been over to awesemo.com, you're not a sub. You don't have to be to check out our NFL Showdown projections today. Our NBA player rankings are all free. And as I have said throughout the past few weeks, yes, we have a promo code, which is NFL strategy, right? All one word, all caps, get you 25% off everything on the site for the first week. Awesemo plus platinum, ownership projections, player projections, top stack tool, boom bust tool, lineup builder. You can get the fantasy cruncher add-on as well. All of that for every sport, not just football, literally any sport that has contests on these sites. We have content for it, all created by the #1 ranked DFS player out there, Awesemo himself. But if you want to take advantage of something maybe a little less expensive, maybe the wallet's a little empty coming up on the holiday season, well, we have the Express Pass, less than $4 a week. It doesn't only have a lot of main slate stuff, but it also has everything for tiers, but it also has all of our tools for showdown slates, everything. So Matt and I talk about the showdown single game top plays tool, which is huge, has leverage scores, optimal captain scores, ownership, all of that, player projections, ownership projections. Again, no better time to take advantage of it than late in the season, like right now, because today, if you were to do it, you get the Thursday, you get, what do we have? 2 Christmas Day games, Matt?
Yeah.
We have two showdown slates on Christmas Day, Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. That's 5 showdown slates right there that you're getting for less than $4 on top of everything else that we do in this Express Pass. So check that out too at awesemo.com/join. All right, let's build a lineup. I'll kick it off with you. Large field tournament. We'll see what we can do to be a little bit different here. What do you want to do at captain?
I kind of want to play Garoppolo, but if we don't play Garoppolo, I for sure want to play one of his pass catchers. Do you have a strong stance?
I don't have a particularly strong stance, but I don't mind Kittle at all.
Let's do Kittle then.
All right, let's go Kittle. And then how do you feel about maybe going with a Jeff Wilson fade here and playing that a little differently? We talked about it earlier. Maybe go with a Jeff Wilson fade. I'll go with Jimmy Garoppolo in the first flex spot.
Yeah, I think it makes sense with our build so far. We're already building in the San Francisco passing attack. So you could work under the assumption that maybe Tennessee got up in the game. They scored on the opening kickoff, whatever it may be. And in that construction, I think Foreman makes sense.
Ah, I like that. Okay. So we got around 5,100 per player remaining here. Not a Christmas movie, Red Dog. Let's go with God. All right. You know what? I'm gonna go with Jermichael Hasty. We got to be different. If we're playing this in the Millie Maker, Matt, we got to be different. I'm gonna go with Jermichael Hasty here.
Yeah, now we have 7K left per player. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Could do a lot with that. So in the range, we're also working with a Jeff Wilson fade here. So I think we can go 1 expensive player, 1 cheap player. I honestly think you could play Hilliard in the same lineup as Foreman because they run the ball upwards of 40 times when they can. So now we can basically play any stud we want if we run Hilliard out there.
Oh man. Okay. So like they just pound the rock.
Yeah. And we've seen that in 2 straight weeks.
That gives us enough. We're just short of Deebo. We're just short of Deebo Samuel here.
That's okay. Leave some salary on the table for the Millie.
Yeah, but we're already so different that I don't know if we need to. And then there's nothing else other than Tannehill. And I don't really want Tannehill if my only Tennessee players are Foreman and Hilliard.
That is true. I'm going to try. If we do Garoppolo captain, you can get Deebo.
I love that. If we're going to go 2 pass catchers. All right. Let's do it. That lineup should actually not be very popular at all, but it's giving us the 2 top pass catching options for San Francisco with Garoppolo captain. Foreman, I think, could be the best option for Tennessee. Who knows what AJ Brown's going to look like? I like that lineup.
I like it too. And all we did to make it work was flip our captain and use Garoppolo instead of Kittle.
Good stuff. Hey, follow Matt at Matt_Gajewski, GAJEWSKI, myself at Loughy _D, LOUGHY _D. Hey, don't forget, if you're watching after the fact, leave a comment, hit that thumbs up. Matt, final score prediction for tonight.
I'm going to go 24-21 in favor of San Francisco.
You say 24-21?
Yes.
Okay, so you're coming in right around the actual total. You're coming in right around the actual spread.
I did not look at the total for this game ahead of time. I know
44.5. So okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right there. You're over by the hook. I'll go. I think this game ends up being low scoring. I'm going Tennessee. 21-17 Tennessee Titans, getting the reinforcements back. Let's do it. Take them to win outright. I actually think San Francisco wins. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm with you. Low scoring game, close game. I don't see it getting out of control, but I do see the NBA strategy show coming up, and you should stick around for that right here on the channel. Adam Scher, Josh Engelman, breaking everything down for a Thursday slate. We'll catch you back here tonight for the NFL Showdown live before lock. Last one of the season. Peace.